Hello there, and welcome to Delightful Dissent. Today it's episode 12, and I'm with Alice Reeves. It's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really good to have you here. Today's assumption is that some people know what's going on. And I'm really, really excited to do this one. I think one of the really big themes, one thing I realized a while back was I've spent a lot of my life assuming that other people had a better idea what was going on than I did. You know, I growing up and even going into work and assuming in organizations that people knew what was happening and what was going on. And I'm not sure that's true. And that's really what we're going to get into today. I also think that because I felt differently about what was going on and I had a slightly different perspective, and other people did seem to know what they were talking about, I didn't necessarily feel it was okay to speak up, or I thought that there was a problem with what I was understanding and my own view. So I'm really, really excited to get into this one today.
Yeah, me too.
It's great. Just in case you're new to the show or you haven't seen that many before, the purpose of Delightful Dissent is to really have a look at some of the deep and implicit assumptions that we're holding and some of the more hidden stuff, because those can be the really tricky ones. They trip us up without us even knowing that's what's going on. And to give you some ideas about how those things might be happening in your life and hopefully open up some new possibility for you, but also to really show what this process of challenging assumptions looks like and give you a chance to see what it's like done in reality, because I'd like everyone to be able to challenge the assumptions that are holding them and other people back in life. It's not just something for a handful of us to do. It's something for everyone to do. And the show's called Delightful Dissent because, yeah, this is about challenging the way we think about something. It's about saying, actually, no, this isn't quite right. But it's about doing so in a positive way and doing so in a slightly different way. It's not about necessarily really proving someone wrong. It's about exploring different ways of understanding things and really opening up new paths because of that understanding. This show is genuinely live, so stuff may go wrong in the background. That's certainly happened before. We've had a few pets guest appearing and things like that. And we don't know where this conversation is going. So we might well cover some personal and challenging topics. This topic in particular has some big personal resonance for me. So it's entirely possible we might talk about some quite personal things. There may also be some strong language. You know, we're talking about serious things and we might use the associated language as well. So if either of those things are potentially a problem for you, then just know that that's the case. This show is all about engaging and working. You know, it's primarily a conversation right now between me and Alice, but it's also a conversation between us and everyone else. So if you're watching live, then please do comment and let us know, and we can share stuff. We'll see those as the stream happens, and we can answer any questions as we go. If you've got a question or a comment afterwards, if you're listening to this or watching the recording, then please do reach out to one or other of us and carry on that conversation. We'd really love to hear from you. So yeah, I'm really pleased to have Alice on today. It's a really really exciting thing for me. We first met in a co-working space, and we had these kind of. We don't do exactly the same work, but I thought we had some really exciting and interesting conversations despite this, and really kind of interesting overlap that wasn't directly related to what we do. I was really struck with Alice's kind of really positive energy and kind of all the ideas, and also that she's working on doing something positive in marketing. And marketing can be quite a problematic space to me. It can be quite a difficult thing, which can be quite normative and can be quite about, really about conformity and about manipulation in some very unpleasant ways, and her approach is completely different to that. So I really wanted to get her on and just sharing some of her ideas. It's enough of me talking. So Alice, could I ask you a little bit to tell us about your work and the kind of people that you like to work with, please?
Yes. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat to you because, like you said, we we had a lot of kind of conversations in passing in the kitchen, and they were like, you know, it's really good to have the opportunity to sit and really kind of, you know, go deep into a topic that I know we're both so passionate about. So yeah, my name's Alice Reeves. I am co-founder and co-director of The Joyful, and we are a brand and marketing agency for movers, shakers, and change makers. So that is anyone who is ambitious, has a really clear goal in mind. They're really passion-driven, purpose-driven. They want to shake things up in their industry or in the world, and they want to create change for people, for planet, and for business. So those are the types of people, really, really passionate, driven founders and entrepreneurs who are out to make change and make a positive difference. And we refer to our marketing, or the type of marketing we do, as impact-led. So it's all informed by the type of impact that our clients want to have on the world. So yeah, like you say, marketing has some dodgy reputations, and we are doing our best to challenge those with the work that we do.
That's great. And I think for me, one of the things about, you know, marketing as a chore, as a thing you have to do versus part of your overall practice and the change that you're trying to make, when I realized that, you know, that you could actually kind of do good with it, that was like a kind of, you know, but it's a hard thing to do because most of the advice out there doesn't tell you how to do that at all. In fact, it probably tells you how to do the opposite.
And that's really interesting, because so many people say to me, like, I don't like marketing. I just feel so icky about selling myself. And so the reframe I always try and do with clients is, well, what if your marketing isn't about selling yourself? It's about getting your really unique and thoughtful perspective out there in the world. It's about sharing the messages that you're really passionate about. And it's about building a platform for you to share ideas and communicate with the type of people that you want to work with, so that you can really give value to them and build genuine relationships. And that's the marketing that works. It's not marketing that focuses on the sale. So that's our approach.
Great. Thank you. Cool. So before we get into actually kind of into the assumption ourselves, I always like to ask my guests to share a quote from someone else who kind of supports the position a little bit, because, you know, we are doing something, you know, there's some edge to some of this stuff. It isn't the conventional way, and it's nice to get support from someone else before we set off doing this. So have you got a quote that you'd like to share with us?
It's quite short, but I'm going to read it anyway. So it is from the legend that is Brené Brown, and the quote is, "Sometimes the bravest and most important thing you can do is just show up."
Yeah. What is it that made you choose that quote? What kind of resonates in it for you?
I think for me, that has so much to do with the theme of confidence and of knowing what's going on. And I think for me, the fact that it's really brave to just show up, even when you aren't sure of the outcome, even if you aren't sure of whether you can do something or whether something is going to work out. If you don't take that first step and show up, then you're never going to know. It can't work out. And until you do that, you're hiding. And that's no good, you know, for me. And it really does, you know, it's even like doing exercise, you know, like running. Like, what's the hardest part? It's getting your trainers on and getting out the front door. You know, what's the hardest part of a yoga class? It's rolling your mat out and getting on it. So it's about that kind of taking the first step with intention. Is sometimes the most bravest and the most difficult part of any challenge.
Yeah, I think there's something really interesting in simply, you know, to stand up and say, I am doing this, to make it obvious that one is doing this, so you're doing something. That's a scary thing in and of itself. You know, it's like, for me, I've certainly, you know, felt I have this lasting feeling, and I you know, from school and all sorts of things, really, that I wasn't quite doing things in the proper way. I wasn't doing it properly. So if people could really see what I was up to, that might be a problem, you know, that I might be. So I think that showing up and that concept of, you know, and showing up in that full sense rather than the kind of partial presence that we have to put up with in many workplaces just to get by is a really big thing, and I think it's a hard thing to do. It's a real challenge.
Yeah.
Cool. So the assumption we're talking about today is that some people know what's going on. So what is it that made you want to talk about this?
I think for me, this is a really interesting one, and it came from when we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a bit older than me, and I said to her, like, when does it make sense? Like, when does it fall into place? When do you step out into the world knowing that you've got it all figured out and you know exactly what's going on? And she's like, never. And I was like, oh. And I think I always kind of had it in my head, I guess, somehow, that there was going to come a point in my life where I would wake up and be like, oh my God, being an adult makes perfect sense now. Like, I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing with my life and exactly how I'm going to do it. And then this is how it's going to be forever. And I think as well, like, there really was, like you say, the assumption that I was waiting to get to that point while there were people around me who were already there and who already had it figured out, who I looked up to as being, you know, these supremely confident people that knew exactly what was what. And then the more I talk to them, the more I realize they don't know what's going on either. So I'm like, well, who actually does know what's going on? And I think the answer is probably no one. There's just people that are really, really good at pretending that they know what's going on.
Yeah, I think for me it's a really interesting one. Yeah, because I similarly, you kind of make the assumption that other people know what's going on. I think, you know, it's quite in some way it's a scary thing, and in some way it's a very liberating thing to assume that there isn't a fixed process, you know, that some people have this incredible insight into and are aware of that we're not. And I think for me, actually, it's turning, you know, the experience is very liberating in the long run, but it's a difficult thing to engage with. And I think that fear and the fear of uncertainty that brings in is a really big challenge for us on an individual level. And when we kind of work with uncertainty and when we work with this kind of stuff, is a challenge for how we bring other people into it as well.
Yeah, completely. And, you know, I think the kind of big thing that I've learned is that I am one of these people that people look at and they think that I know what's going on because of that confidence thing. Like, I am a very confident person. I have always been a very confident person. I was a very confident child. You know, I would loudly proclaim that things were one way to my parents with my hands on my hips. And they would roll their eyes, you know, as a teenager. When you're a teenager, you think you know everything, and you think all of the adults around you are just really stupid. And you know, I kind of carried that confidence through, even as I got older, and the kind of doubt started to creep in. Like, I've always been really good with people. My manner is very confident. My speech is very direct. And so I think that even as I got older, an imposter syndrome started to creep in, because that is when imposter syndrome creeps in. The more knowledge you gain, the more knowledge you also gain of all of the things there are to know that you don't know. And I think that's such an interesting paradox. Like, imposter syndrome is not something that goes away the more you know. It's something that gets stronger the more you know. And I think because I had this confident, practiced manner, and because I'm really good at trying things, and, you know, I'm a person that can't sit in my comfort zone. You know, I switch jobs kind of, you know, every year, every 2 years, because once I hit a comfort zone, I need another challenge. And so I think when you're a person who is very good at pushing the edges of your comfort zone, you also become a person who is really good at projecting the confidence that you need to take steps into kind of the next level. And so I think people are really surprised when they get to know me that, you know, I'm not actually this confident person that knows what's going on all the time and knows and is 100% confident in everything I'm doing. I actually do have this really loud inner critic and an imposter syndrome voice that's telling me that, you know, I don't know enough and I'm a fraud and I'm going to be found out. And I think that's such an interesting one, because outwardly I can project confidence and I do feel like I'm a confident person. I would definitely describe myself as a confident person, but that definitely coexists with a sometimes very intense and quite crippling self-doubt. And this feeling that every time I do push the edge of my comfort zone, it's not, you know, I put stuff out on social media and I give talks and stuff. And I think a lot of people do just think that I'm like, oh, right, ready for the next challenge. Like, let's go. And it's not like that at all. It's like I've literally got this like perpetual little character in my head that's like clinging to the bars of the roller coaster at the top going, oh my God, why are we doing this again? Why are we doing this again? Please.
I think I really, that feeling so resonates for me. And I think for me, it's like, there's something really interesting because that's surprising. It's one of the interesting things about imposter syndrome, before I get into that, is I ran a workshop on imposter syndrome a little while back. And I think I'm not sure how much of my workshop actually did anything. I think just getting a whole load of people in a room who all kind of being slightly more open about their imposter syndrome and being open, and they basically all looked around the room and said, well, wow, if she's feeling imposter syndrome, she's amazing. If she's feeling imposter syndrome, then maybe my imposter syndrome isn't telling me the full truth either. and I suspect that may have actually been the most important part of the whole thing, rather than that, you know, anyone kind of worked on it themselves. And I think how we work with uncertainty and doubt is a huge thing. And I completely, you know, I really resonate with that feeling of going the kind of roller coaster and that commitment and the fear that comes with it and the anxiety that comes with it, but also the drive. And I think it's that when you're driven by that kind of change, you know, you've got that kind of restlessness, I suppose, or maybe a difficulty resting, you know, and that you know, it does make you do new things and make you change and make you kind of dynamic, but equally it does push you into this place where you are unknowing all the time. And I think one of the things for me is coming to terms with the fact that actually you can get very good at that step. You know, if you do it over and over again, there's a practice to being in uncertainty.
Yes.
And taking that step that is a different thing and is actually a capability of itself.
Yeah, it's really interesting. An analogy that I really like to use is like if you're playing a like a level-based computer game, and you know you start out on the first level and you lose a few times, you lose up all your lives, you have to start again, but then you get to the end of the level. And then you might go back and do the level again if, you know, you can get a higher score or whatever. But not many people are just going to be satisfied playing that same level over and over again. At some point, you're going to have to go to the next level. And when you level up, there's going to be like things that do different stuff. There's going to be different things you have to find that you don't know about. There's going to be different enemies you have to fight. You're going to lose all your lives again and you're going to be sent back to the start. But then you get to the end of that level and then there's a choice. Do I want to go back and play this level again until I've got this level like perfect, you know, or now that I've done that level, do I want to go to the next level where there's going to be all of this uncertainty again and I might not know what I'm doing? And I'm definitely a next level person. Like, and I, you know, that has always really helped me. And I physically think about it as like, right, I'm stepping into the next level and it's going to be really scary. And there's going to be stuff here that I don't know. but how can I use what I learned in that level and then extrapolate and learn from this one?
I think it's really interesting. And for me, I think if we play with the metaphor, I haven't finished a lot of video games. It's quite rare. I played quite a lot. I haven't finished a lot.
Neither have I. Pokemon's about it.
Yeah. And I think this is it. And I think that swapping as well, and actually part of this is the new domains, the new spaces. And it's like, yeah, there's the kind of going up a level within one space and within one game, but also the fact that you kind of learn and that you can move between them, and that there is enough, you know. I've had a lot of different hobbies and a lot of different practice, you know, a lot of different things in my life, and I realized I thought for a long time there was something wrong with me for wanting to for not kind of perfecting them, not taking them like all the way, you know. And I realized actually I kind of stopped when I've got what I wanted out of them. When I've kind of got to a basic level of competence, I understand the principles and I can apply them elsewhere. So that's it. I'm done. I've got what I enjoy out of it. And that's okay. I think that's a really different way of thinking about things. You know, we have this idea of, you know, related to this idea of kind of certainty and confidence is perfection. You know, it's like, how if I can only be confident if I've perfected this thing, you know, and that's a very different, for me, thinking about it is very different. You know, as once I know what's going on, you know, is perfection on some level. Like I can predict it all. I know exactly this space. For me, there's very little fun in that.
Yeah. It's a really interesting one. I totally relate. Like I'm a person that has picked up and dropped so many different hobbies because exactly that. I reach a point where I'm like, I'm not getting what I got from this anymore. And so I have a lot of knowledge about a lot of very random things, but I'm not like a super specialist in one particular area. But because I have so much knowledge of so many other things, I can almost like extrapolate what I need in almost any situation because I kind of cast that net wide. But, you know, but then there's also an awareness that there are people, not even probably, more expert than me in almost every area of my knowledge. But a big exercise for me has been to become confident in the breadth of my knowledge and the value that I can bring in having that breadth of knowledge rather than that laser focus.
Absolutely. And I think understanding that and valuing that in yourself, because it's not something we're ever really taught. You know, one of the real deep societal assumptions, you know, is that we should become these kind of you know, a specific domain authority. You know, we should know everything in that domain, and that's how we kind of succeed, how we help other people and all of that stuff. And my experience is very, very similar, that actually I know a little bit about an awful lot.
Yes.
And it's interesting to hear you say, one of the sources of my concern is fear. There is that there's probably in everything I know, there's someone who almost certainly knows more about it, but it's the connections and the way that those things are brought together that's that feels like the unique value for me and in what I do.
Yeah. I think it can be really hard to feel confident in your own knowledge. Like certainly for me, when I know that there are people out there who know more than me, but it's that trust in myself that actually I know enough to be able to do this thing really well and get the job done. And I think that's a massive, like talking about like assumptions, I think that's a massive thing that stops a lot of people, is that they, and I know I've had this in the past where if I don't know everything about something, I wonder if I can do it. You know, a big kind of thing where this showed up was starting my own business. Like I said to myself for so many years, I wanted to do it, and I put it off because I was like, you know what? Again, I'm going to come to that point where like I just know, like I'm just old enough to just know how to run a business, and that's when I'm going to run my own business, because you know I need to have all of this knowledge, because there's all of these people over here who I know who clearly know how to run a business. And actually what happened was, on my 30th birthday, I decided on a total whim to hand my notice in to my job, because I think for me, I don't know if I had in my head somehow of like, you know what, when I turn 30, I'm going to know what's going on. Like, and then I turned 30 and I was like, is this it? Really? Like, is this it? And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And for the next like 3 months, I was a mess, really. For the next 3 months, I was just like, what have I done? How am I going to do this? But I just found the people that knew more than me about the things I needed to know. And I got enough knowledge to do what I needed to do. And I tried it and I got it wrong. And I tried it again after I'd learned. And I think that's a like, for me, that is such a driver of confidence, is that you try stuff and it works or it doesn't work. You learn from it, you try it again, and it works out. And I think the trying and the failing and the trying and the failing and the trying and the succeeding is where confidence comes from. It's not about knowledge. It's being in the game. It's being, on the court, in the arena, like Brené Brown, I think, calls it. It's being the person that is prepared to put yourself out there and try stuff and see what happens. And like, there has never been a point in my life where I haven't figured it out. Like, I'm 34 years old and everything life has thrown at me, I've figured out. And now that it's happened to me, I know what's going on. You can't, and it's this paradox of thinking you're going to gain this knowledge from somewhere of what it takes to be an adult, to be an expert without trying. But I think there's so much knowledge you can only gain by trying it for yourself. It's the difference between like transformative learning and informational learning.
Yeah.
And for me, my own level of confidence is so dependent on that transformational learning. And yet I have to battle with such a fear of failure in order to force myself to get there. So I feel like so much of the time there's this real duality going on in my brain in terms of like confidence and self-doubt and fear of failure, but need to fail in order to grow. And it's that constant like internal kind of battle.
Yeah, it's really hard. And interestingly, what jumps out for me is I left my regular day job as a birthday present to myself as well. So it's an interesting practice, and yeah, set up on my own thing and plan mine a bit longer, and then found out none of those plans were at all reality. So I think it's an interesting thing, how much you can plan and how much you can genuinely predict, and that some ways the only way is to get stuck in. And I think for me
my plan was always to be a journalist. I did my journalism qualification. I graduated into the 2008-2009 recession, and there were no journalism jobs. Everyone was being let go. So this thing I'd had in my mind of like, do my English degree, do my journalism qualification, be a journalist, was just gone. I couldn't do it. It was, or it would have meant working for free for so many years. And I got a marketing job, and here I am, however many years later, 12, 13 years later, and I run a marketing business. That was never the plan.
Yeah, similarly. And I think so much of this is really interesting because, we get these ideas about things, and it's for me, I found it really hard to understand how things are actually going to feel when I do them. And it matters, how things feel matters to me hugely. It's a really, some people don't experience it that strongly. Some people have, but for me, it's one of my strongest senses. So it's overwhelming if it feels wrong. Mm-hmm. I have a very limited capacity to deal with that, to kind of endure that. Mm-hmm. And so feeling into things like, does this feel right, is a huge thing. And I think I've often had, these ideas, particularly about what I wanted and where I was going, because I think it's going to feel good. I think that's going to be how it is. Actually, it isn't at all. And it feels very different. And so I found that people talk about feeling into situations, but there's actually something for me really, and it's interesting about what you were saying about learning and failing, is like feeling into a situation first. So you think it feels good. So it's already feeling good. Then the only question is, does it work?
Yeah.
Because you can ask other people that feeling, you can ask yourself the feeling thing. It's like, does this feel like the right thing to do right now? Great. Then does it work? And that's the test. Because I think a lot of people, for me, and maybe this is related to imposter syndrome actually, feel that they can't do the stuff that feels good to them, that's really them. They have to do the external stuff, the stuff that gets approval, the right way, the normal way, whatever it is. And they can't do something different, and there's something that's a real expression of what feels good to them, because then they can't take that test and say, well, does this work? Does this do what I want it to do as well? Does it have the kind of outcome that I want it to do? Like, it's because they're two kind of slightly separate things. Does it feel intrinsically enjoyable? And does this manifest in some material practical outcome? And when we join them together, we kind of get quite stuck. And
I think that ties into the assumption really in a really interesting way as well, I think, because you spend a lot of your early life being told by adults, here's how your life is going to go, and here's how your life is going to work. Like, you're going to go to school, you're going to go to college, you're going to get a university degree, you're going to get a job, you're going to meet someone, you're going to fall in love, you're going to marry, you're going to buy a house, you're going to have children, you're going to work until you're this old, then you're going to retire and you're going to have your pension. And I think that you go so, that's still so kind of drummed into us as children as being like the way your life is going to go. And it's told to us with such confidence by people who have it figured out and who are going on that path and doing really well on that path, like the game of life, like they're ticking all the boxes, like, yes, job, marriage, house, nice car, nice things, and you see them and you think, oh my God, well, they have it all figured out, they know what they're doing, so I'm going to take that from them, that this is how my life should go. And I think my experience was I got down that path, so far down that path, and it didn't feel right. And, at that point, I was at my mid-20s and I had this attitude of like, I'm 25 and I'm winning at the game of life. Like, I've got the house, I've got the partner, I've got the job, everything's going great. And then it was like this, oh my God, I don't want this. Like, this does not feel right. I do not want this. And there was certainly that like, oh my God, what are people going to think? Like, what are people going to think when I walk away from this relationship, when I walk away from this house, when I... and then later when I walk away from this job, like what are people going to be thinking about me? And, and saying, God, well, she clearly hasn't got her life figured out. And I know that there were people really close to me that when I quit my job were like, talking to my mum and going, does she really know what she's doing? And I think that for me, feeling right is so important. And I still fall down that trap. I still find myself, I go down a path where other people have said, you have to go this way, because I see them as an authority who knows what they're doing. And I think, oh yeah, I'm going to do it the way because they've done it that way and it clearly works for them and they clearly know what's going on. So I'm going to go down this path. And then I only get so far before I'm like, oh, ew, no, this doesn't fit. This feels weird. This isn't me. And then I have to go back out again. But when I follow the path that feels right to me, even if other people look at it and go, are you sure? That's when I'm happiest.
Yeah, I think it also, for me, it's like, because when stuff goes wrong on that path, when stuff doesn't go as expected on my own stuff, it's like, well, I learn a bit more about how I'm going in that direction, and I get better at going in the direction that I want to go. When I follow other people's kind of path, and again, really similar story, and working in large organizations is a lot about approval and a lot about kind of, what other people think rather than what actually works. It's so removed from the actual what you do as an organization very often. Yeah. And so I think it's such a challenge to then reorient in your own experience, and particularly when that experience is different. When you do see the world slightly differently to the mainstream, there, so no one has quite done this in this way before.
Mm-hmm.
And we're kind of allowed to do something that we're kind of allowed to experiment in one of the two spaces. We're allowed to feel differently about something, but we have to do the same as everyone else. Or we're allowed to do something different, but it has to be kind of within that space of, okay, we know this. Changing both of them, like I feel differently, so I'm going to do something differently. That feels like a really big challenge, and I think it's almost a challenge to people's certainty. If it's successful, it's actually quite a scary thing for people who are fully buying into their own certainty. Yeah. And are scared of because it shows there is another way, and it shows that the way that they're telling everyone isn't necessarily the best way for everyone.
Yeah, and yeah, completely. And I definitely encountered that. Like, it's when you speak out and you say you're going to do something differently, and it does come from a place of love. It completely comes from a place of love, but that does spark a lot of people in your life, like, pulling you aside and being like, are you sure? Like, are you sure that this is where you want to do? Like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And that can feel really frustrating. And I think if you don't have that sense of like inner confidence, then you can really easily, and I've done this before, you back yourself out where you're like, oh, I'm not going to do it because this person is, has highlighted that, oh, there's this thing I haven't thought about, so I don't know enough. So I need to go back into my, like study, back to the drawing board and do a whole load more research before I'm ready. I think, that happens a lot.
I think it's interesting because for me, some of that is related, is helpful, and it's, again, perhaps it's connecting to one's own feelings and being able to give them words and give them something concrete, because quite often, we experience for me, this place is about ambivalence on some level, and and that not knowing is a difficult thing. It's not so much the unknown as the uncertain. It's the stuff that we just don't have. We have a sense of, but we don't have like words for, or we don't have a concrete idea of what's going to happen. And feeling into that and leaning into that for me is often a really interesting thing, and often where there are pre-existing weird contradictions in the way that people are doing things. Mm-hmm. And that's why I feel ambivalent about them. And I think that for me is a really telling thing to work with, and it actually turns out to be a very helpful thing to work with. So letting myself explore that is really helpful. I think for me it's letting myself do other people's learning for them. Has been the problem, I think. And very often, we're kind of, we are told that that's the way that a lot of society works. Mm-hmm. The authority has people go out and do things, and then they face the consequences, which is the learning on some level. And the authority figure never gets the opportunity to learn and update their way of seeing the world and their models and their understanding of the context and their physical embodied sense of it as well, because that's the other side of it, is we feel this stuff on a real level, and like, there's an abstract part of it, and abstract thought is very helpful, but it's also about embodied context and knowing when the right approach is to do it, and the qualitative, the feel of it, and how that works, which is at least as important as the kind of abstract what it is and what you do.
Mm-hmm. Completely. Talking of being live and technical failures, my battery's running low, so I'm just going to
that's exciting. Okay,
so that it doesn't die.
Great. Thank you. Okay, cool. That's as I said, this is live, and this is the kind of thing we encounter. So on the talk about assumptions, I will give you a quick preview of the show next week. We're going to be going in depth about ambivalence and looking at that. So I think there's some really interesting stuff for me around the role of ambivalence as relates to this imposter syndrome, and that it's a difficult thing to feel. Okay, are we all ready to go? And excellent, cool. Okay. So Great, yeah, and like dealing with these little uncertainty things is actually a part of it, and I think this is relates. Imposter syndrome and perfectionism are interestingly related, and I've spoken about idealism as well, and how that's related too, and the search for an ideal thing is idealism, and it stops us from doing anything. It's crippling in terms of like really getting going with something and wanting to make it watertight. And I think for me, perfectionism and idealism are misunderstood, and actually for many people it's idealism that's holding them back. Perfectionism is much more about getting stuck doing one thing, and a lot of people do have that problem, and they kind of get stuck in that loop. But for me and the kind of people I talk to, it's actually idealism. It's the wanting to know everything before I get started, and a lot of that voice is other people's confidence. And it's also, when we say that some people know what's going on and that they know what's happened, that what it'll happen, is that sometimes it's trusting the voice that they know that something bad's going to happen. It's the believing the people who tell us, yeah, well, if you do this, then this bad outcome will happen. It's like, maybe not. Maybe I don't experience that as a bad outcome in the first place. And all of that stuff. And we kind of take on that fear without really understanding the other stuff.
Yeah, completely. And I think that's so interesting, the distinction that you make between perfection and idealism. I definitely think I have elements of both, like for sure. And I've always sort of related to myself as a perfectionist, and it does massively hold me back. And I think that when it's really easy, when you have the assumption that other people know what they're doing, to use them as a yardstick to measure yourself, and I think for me it's not so much about like this unattainable, arbitrary level of perfection. It's about seeing what other people are doing and then thinking, well, if I can't do it as well as they can, then what's the point? And that is, they say comparison is the thief of joy, right? And I think that is certainly something that I experience, and I think that it is a real re-education to kind of do for yourself, that actually you don't have to do something in the same way as someone else or be better than them. It's about finding your own way, and that there are some people who are going to think that your way is better. Just because you think that someone else's way is better, just because you think that someone else is doing it better than you, doesn't mean that everyone else is going to hold that view.
Absolutely. And I think for me, I've often struggled with this idea of, heroes and masters, and not wanting to be that myself, and very much avoiding that, because I think it's quite I have some strong experience of that not being a good way to relate to the world. But it doesn't mean that we have to do everything from first principles either, and that we can take some of that. It's just saying, well, we've got our own context, we've got our own situation, and I like what that person's doing, and I also like what that person's doing. I like what that person's doing, and that I'm going to weave them together in a different way. And the uniqueness emerges from the combination of all of those things, rather than there being like a fixed domain in which one can attain mastery. And I think, we use these metaphors. It's only really true in things like sport, where there's this really clear goal, and in the sense of, we know where we're going, we know what we're doing. In sport, we know what we're trying to do. In everything else, we don't really. In life, we don't know what we're doing on that level. We make helpful assumptions to give us something kind of to do and to work towards, but we never know what the kind of goal is on that level, and it can change as well, and it might be that we decide, okay, we don't want that anymore, that we're working towards creating something that we don't want anymore, and that is a really different way of thinking about things, and a different difficult way of thinking about things, because it then gives us the challenge of figuring out what our own goals are and what we're actually wanting to achieve. And for a lot of people, that's very new territory.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
So yeah.
Yeah.
On that, so leaving someone with it rather than leaving people with a like completely unanswered question and a really, really difficult thing. I think one of the other things I should say before we go into that is that we often see things as problems in need of a complete solution, and related to this. And actually what happens is when we're working with these big complex things and these, life and the positive change that we want to create, we can't actually solve it. We can resolve it. We can make it easier. We can help some group of people with it in a certain way. And actually looking for a complete solution, so no one ever has to think about this and feel this and experience this again, isn't really possible. And trying to do it actually holds us back from making it better. So, yeah, it's a real challenge. And I think that relates to this. If we know what's going on and we're clear what's going on, we could maybe perfect it and solve it. But actually, because we can't really, we can have a sense of it, but we can't 100% know.
No.
Then we can't 100% solve it either.
Yeah. And I think as well, like, the people who think they know what's going on are the people you have to be most wary of, because if you are a person who is always learning, is always pushing yourself, is always growing out of your comfort zone, and is always learning, you are always, almost constantly going to feel like you don't 100% entirely know what you're doing, and you will be searching for new knowledge and wanting to develop yourself. And because you have that growth mindset, you know that there is more to know, and you know that you are never going to reach an end point of knowledge. You are always going to keep learning, and you take new information and you reassess your beliefs and you reassess the way you do things, and then you do it better. So you're always a person that's doing the best with the knowledge you have, never assuming that your knowledge is complete. And I think as well, something I really want to leave people with is that don't accept information coming from someone purely because they have said it in a really confident way and because it's worked for them. And I've been on both sides of this. Like, I have both accepted from people that they know better than me, and I also say things in a really confident way sometimes, and people just agree with me, even though actually I'm not doing it in the best way. I'm not saying it in the best way. So, I think you can be confident and be open to input from others, and be open to challenge from others. And I think as well, just don't ever be afraid to ask for help either. Like, when you ask for help, it doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. When you ask for help, it means that you want to make sure that what you're doing is going to get the best possible outcome, and be open to learning that actually you know enough about what you're doing to do a really good job, but with someone else's input, you could make things easier for yourself, deliver a better outcome, be more efficient with it, learn, grow, develop. And that kind of lack of, that need for clarification, or that want for clarification, doesn't necessarily equate with a lack of confidence or you not knowing what's going on. Those things can coexist.
Absolutely. And I think it does loop back really interestingly to what we were saying at the beginning around marketing and how we're selling and explaining what we do. And for those of us who do work in this space, in this more uncertain space, there's definitely a big thing, about the suggestion is you're selling people solutions. And that you need to be really clear, and that if you're selling someone a solution, a series of steps, you do need to project absolute kind of knowledge, because if that's what you're offering, that does require that knowledge. And I think we often fall into that trap, and it's actually a very toxic way to work with people and organizations, because you end up projecting that model onto other people. And instead, yes, you can know what you know and know some of the principles and create frameworks and help people, but it is always a co-constructed, it's a journey. It's not not anything with certainty, and you don't know, you're not giving people a series of, like a recipe, a series of fixed steps to work with, because those are really, really, really unhelpful and divorced from context, and prevent you from learning, prevent the people that you work with from learning and developing their capability too, which is the other part of it. It's the expert has to almost protect their knowledge and then can't learn themselves. And if you're motivated by learning and exploring, that's not a happy place to be.
No.
But and I think where this leads me to, and to put it into practical terms, is really it's okay to do this in everything that you do. And this show is actually, for me, is a kind of example of working in this way. And when I run workshops, I work in this way. When I work one-to-one with clients, I work in this way. It's not directive. It's not that I'm coming in and saying, look, I know you should do this, this, and this. It's an exploration and a finding out and a creation as we go. And that it's okay to work in that way.
Yeah, completely. And I think, like we find so much in like marketing, like people will come to us and be like, can you just like fix my marketing for me? Like, can you just make it work? Whereas actually marketing works best when it's a co-creation with us and the teams behind the business, not when it's just us forcing a out of the box solution on people. And, the importance of that co-creation and that partnership and that input from each other and that growth and that challenge. My favorite clients are the clients that say to me, like, why are you doing that? Because then I really have to think and dig back into my own knowledge and my own rationale and really consider, and then become way more confident in my own solutions. Because I really have to think about that. I'm not just blindly making these recommendations because they've worked for this client and that client and that client. Like it's really going back and thinking, right, this unique situation, what's right for them? What works for them? Am I really recommending the solution that is the right solution in this instance? And I think a lot of people don't like being challenged. But
yeah, I think there is, one of the things is maybe the flip side of this, how we challenge people and how we explore this and how we do it in a gentle way is actually when we're inviting people into this, is that it's, a lot of times in my life, I've been quite desperate and like wanted a solution, wanted someone to fix this for me. There's a big question for me then about how do we make an offer to other people for this work that actually feels better than just having it solved. That feels more, that genuinely feels like, okay, I don't actually want it solved anymore. I want this thing instead. Because so we're not like tricking people into there being like saying, okay, I've got this solution. And then people turning up and going like, well, actually, I can't solve it for you.
Yeah.
Which feels like, it doesn't feel like a good way to start a relationship with deception, So yeah, I don't know.
I feel like that's a whole nother like podcast. It's like
probably. I mean, that's often what happens here.
Like the assumption someone else can fix everything for me.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to that, or you can come on and talk about that one next time. But in terms of like how you can help people and how you can do that, I know you're coming up with, you've got a workshop coming up soon, and how people can explore this a bit for themselves, not necessarily in context of the workshop, but the kind of way that people could do this and how they can approach this instead of feeling this need to project this kind of certainty and tell people exactly what's going to happen when they're conveying what they do.
Yeah. So I've got a workshop coming up with the Good Business Club. So I know a lot of people that watch this are Good Business Club members, which is on the 16th of February, which is all about being visible on video like we're doing right now. You want to learn how to do this? That workshop's for you. And that follows on from my business partner, Sophie, co-director of The Joyful, did a workshop, which is available as a replay a couple of weeks ago, which was all about visibility and finding the confidence to be visible and finding your voice. So this workshop follows on from that in terms of, right, you're geared up, you know what you want to talk about, it's now empowering you to have the confidence to use the technology and get your message across in a way that resonates and that lands and that is a reflection of you and that looks good and that is easy to watch.
I think all those things. For me, my biggest kind of insight or biggest kind of realization into this was actually I was far too much more located in other people's needs when I was trying to do this, when I started doing it. And that the quickest way to doing it, or certainly to narrowing down what might work, is to do something that was fun for me and easy for me. And part of the reason I love doing this is because I really love having these conversations. I just wanted to have these interesting conversations. It provides a context for me to do so, and great, it shares stuff. But fundamentally, it's about having a really interesting conversation. And that's what mattered to me. And I think being able to use video is such a great method and kind of medium for conveying that. That we've got all these tools and tech, and it can be a bit mind-boggling, but narrowing it down to something that you just want to do and using it for that is a great way to do it.
And, particularly if you're a person that is selling yourself as a service, whether you're a yoga teacher or a coach or a consultant, what video does for your potential clients, for your audience, is gives them a taster of what it's like to work with you and to interact with you and to engage with you. People watching this video, this is what it's like to work with me. I'm a total chatterbox. I go off on tangents. I use a lot of hand gestures. I say things really confidently. It's like, if people, it almost gives your audience the opportunity to sell, to kind of opt out. If they don't like you, and there are going to be people who don't like the way you look, who think your voice is annoying, who disagree with you, who that immediately filters those people out as being your clients, because they get to see and connect with you in this really genuine, authentic way, particularly when it's live and it's unscripted. They really get to see what you're like.
So if someone has watched this and they've decided they like you and they want to get in touch, what's the best way for them to reach out and carry on this conversation?
Probably on social media. So I think you shared in the event my LinkedIn. So it's Alice Reeves on LinkedIn. The Joyful. So our website is wearethejoyful.com. So you can find us there. And then I am at Alice_Reeves on Twitter and Instagram. And I'm always there on social media. So
cool. Lovely stuff. Thank you. Cool. So I hope that's raised some questions for everyone and got you thinking, maybe challenge some of your assumptions. If it has, please get in touch with Alice or with me, in all the normal ways. The next episode is we're going to be talking about how feeling ambivalent is a sign of trouble. We're going to be looking at that as an assumption, which I think links really nicely, because ambivalence and certainty are very closely related things. And I'm going to be talking to Patricia von Papstein about that. She's doing some really, really interesting work around tech and innovation, but from a very human perspective. So very much aligned with the stuff that I'm doing too. So that's really exciting. And that's going to take place at 5 p.m. on Monday, the 8th of February. So that's next Monday. These do move around a bit because they are live. That's just the way it is. And so I hope to see you live there. Thank you very much for joining me, Alice. I really, really enjoyed that conversation. It was really, it was as free ranging as I kind of expected, and I should think we could carry on for hours. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all, everyone, for watching. It really is you that make this show meaningful. If you enjoyed it, please do share it, comment, get involved, and go out there and make some delightful dissent for yourself. Cheers.